What would you do if your new roommate was your old bully? Would you run, or stay long enough to learn the truth? Because Elif is about to find out that the girl who hurt her most may also be the one who loves her most. When Elif pushed open the dorm room door with one suitcase, 2 overstuffed canvas bags, and the last clean page of the life she had promised herself, the first thing she saw was a black leather jacket hanging off the back of the chair by the window. The second thing she saw was the woman standing on the bed to pin a university flag to the wall. Asya Karahan turned at the sound of the door, one hand still raised, and the little silver nails she was holding spilled across the mattress. For one impossible second, neither of them breathed. Elif felt every muscle in her body lock. Her high school bully was her new roommate. Not just a girl she had fought with once. Not just a mean classmate with a sharp mouth. Asya had been the girl who could ruin an entire week with one smirk. The feared female alpha of their school. The golden daughter of a powerful pack family. The captain of everything that mattered. And the reason Elif still had dreams about laughter in crowded hallways. The silence stretched until it hurt. Then Asya said very quietly, "You." Elif dropped her backpack. It hit the floor with a thud that sounded like her pulse. "No." She said it again, because once was not enough for disasters like this. "No." Asya climbed down from the bed with controlled grace, but the shock on her face was real. Elif hated that she could still read her expressions. "You've got to be joking," Asya muttered. Elif laughed once, breathless and ugly. "I was going to say the same thing." The dorm room was too small for the amount of history in it. 2 twin beds, 2 desks, 2 wardrobes, 1 narrow bathroom, 1 window looking over the freshman quad, no place to hide. Asya set the little box of nails down on the desk with a careful hand. "You can talk to housing." Elif stared at her. "That's your solution?" "It's the only one I have." Asya's scent hit her a second later, cedar and rain and something metallic beneath it. Clean alpha dominance that made Elif's omega instincts tense in warning. Humiliation followed the instinct so fast it made her dizzy. 4 years away from this girl and her body still remembered what fear smelled like. Elif dragged air into her lungs. "I'm not living with you." Asya's jaw tightened. "I didn't arrange it." "No, you just benefit from it like you always did." Something moved behind Asya's eyes, some flicker Elif did not trust enough to name. "Believe whatever you want." Elif almost lunged at her then, not because she wanted to fight physically, but because the calm in Asya's voice brought back too many memories. Asya sitting at the back of homeroom while Elif's presentation board shook in her hands. Asya leaning against the locker banks while 3 other girls laughed at the ink stain across Elif's blouse. Asya watching from the art corridor when Elif's scholarship sketches were found ripped off the wall and scattered across the floor like leaves after a storm. Asya had not always been the loudest cruelty in the room. She had simply been the center of gravity around which all the cruelty rotated. Elif's hands curled into fists. "Do you know what?" Asya looked at her with infuriating steadiness. "No." Elif smiled without warmth. "Good." She turned, yanked her suitcase back into the hallway, and marched toward the stairwell before the tears gathering behind her eyes could humiliate her all over again. The housing office was 4 buildings away and smelled like printer toner, old coffee, and bureaucratic indifference. A student assistant with kind eyes and 0 authority clicked through Elif's file, apologized 3 times, and told her every freshman room was full. There were no emergency swaps, no temporary singles, no overflow spaces. She could submit a transfer request and maybe hear something in 2 weeks. 2 weeks! It sounded like a prison sentence. When Elif walked back to the dorm, twilight was bleeding across the quad, and groups of first years were laughing in circles on the grass, as if the universe had not just personally insulted her. She climbed the stairs slowly. At the end of the corridor, room 318 waited like a threat. When she pushed the door open again, Asya was sitting at her desk with a legal pad and a laptop, sleeves rolled up, dark hair tied back, looking like she belonged there. Elif hated that too. Asya looked up. Well, Elif shut the door harder than necessary. They said no. Asya held her gaze for a moment, then she nodded once. You can take the lower bed. Elif let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Wow. Asya looked back at her notes. It's closer to the window. Did you rehearse being tolerable? Asya's pen stopped moving. No. The room fell quiet except for the distant noise of girls in the hallway and the scratch of a leaf dragging her suitcase to the empty side of the room. She unpacked with violent efficiency. Books on the shelf, clothes in the wardrobe, skincare in a little tray by the sink, sketchbooks stacked carefully under the desk. Every motion said, "Stay away from me." Every silence said, "You already know why." Asya did not interrupt. She didn't mock Elif's color-coded folders. She didn't comment on the framed print Elif set on the desk. She didn't even ask about the old Polaroid of Elif and her cousin tucked into the mirror. That made it worse somehow. Mockery would have been familiar. Restraint felt like strategy. By the time lights-out hours hit, the room had become a border dispute. Elif's desk lamp angled sharply inward. Asya's shoes lined neatly under her bed. The shared bathroom shelf divided down the middle with military precision. The window cracked exactly 4 centimeters because Elif wanted fresh air, and Asya apparently ran hot. Elif climbed to the top bunk because she could not bear the thought of sleeping beneath Asya. Above her, the ceiling was stained near one corner. Below her, Asya moved around quietly, setting an alarm for some inhuman morning hour, placing her phone on the desk, turning off the main light. The darkness pressed close. Elif shut her eyes. Sleep did not come. Memory did. Sophomore year. Chemistry lab. A girl named Pinar taking Elif's lab notebook and passing it to 2 others while Asya leaned against the counter with folded arms and watched. Junior year. A rainy sports day when someone replaced Elif's clean shirt with a soaked one and she had to sit through the afternoon shivering while Asya's friends whispered. Senior year. The scholarship board display torn down. Charcoal dust under her nails. Paper ripped straight through the face she had spent 6 nights drawing. Asya by the window. Silent. Beautiful. Impossible to forgive. Elif rolled onto her side and stared into the dark. Below her, Asya's breathing settled into the deep rhythm of sleep. Elif hated her for sleeping so easily. The next morning began with a drill team siren disguised as an alarm. Elif woke with a startled gasp, cracked her elbow on the bed rail, and looked down ready to murder. Asya was already up, already dressed in black athletic shorts and a university training shirt, already tying her hair at the nape of her neck. Morning light made her look unfairly composed. You set that for 5:30? Asya glanced up. I have training? You have a death wish. Asya's mouth twitched before she flattened it. I hit snooze twice. Elif glared. You are a war criminal. Asya pulled a bottle of water from under the desk. Good morning to you too. Elif climbed down, stiff and sleep-deprived and irrationally furious that Asya still knew how to aim for dry humor. When she stumbled out of the bathroom 10 minutes later, there was a paper cup on her desk. Coffee. No lid. No note. Elif stopped short. Asya was slinging a duffel bag over her shoulder. I didn't ask for that. Asya's face gave nothing away. You looked like you were about to commit a felony. Elif eyed the cup. I'm not taking food or drinks from you. It's from the machine downstairs. I don't care. Asya adjusted the strap on her shoulder. You used to need sugar in the first cup, or you got headaches by 10. The words landed like a slap. Elif's eyes snapped to hers. That had been true in high school. That had been true during a period of her life she had assumed Asya only remembered as a source of entertainment. Asya seemed to realize too late what she had revealed. Her jaw tightened. Elif. Don't. Elif grabbed the cup and dumped it in the sink. The smell of coffee filled the room. She hated that her hands trembled afterward. Asya watched in silence. Then she nodded once, opened the door, and left. That first week became a campaign of controlled hostility. Asya's training schedule clashed with Elif's late studio hours. Elif's music annoyed Asya. Asya's protein powder smelled like sweet chalk and misery. The overhead light stayed on too late. The alarm started too early. The bathroom mirror fogged up. The floor collected damp footprints. The room was always either too warm or too cold, depending on who had last won the window war. But beneath the friction was something stranger. Asya never made fun of Elif in front of anyone. She never told their new classmates about high school. She never let anyone else joke at Elif's expense in her presence. At first, Elif assumed she was planning something subtler. Then Friday happened. Elif came back from Intro to Visual Theory with charcoal on her wrist and a headache behind her left eye. The room door was open. Inside, 3 alpha girls were sprawled across Asya's side of the room like it belonged to them. One was sitting on Elif's desk chair. Another had her boots on Elif's rug. The third, a sleek, dark-haired law student named Celine, whom Elif recognized from orientation whispers, was holding one of Elif's sketchbooks. Elif's chest went cold. Put that down. Celine looked up slowly. Her smile was polished and cruel. Oh. She lifted the sketchbook higher. The roommate speaks. Asya came out of the bathroom in a black tank top, saw the book in Celine's hand, and went utterly still. The air in the room changed. Celine. Her voice was quiet enough to be dangerous. Celine turned the sketchbook over as if inspecting the cover. Relax. She flicked her gaze to Elif. I just wanted to see what our mystery Omega draws. Elif stepped forward. Give it back. Celine's expression sharpened at the command in Elif's tone. Then, before Elif could snatch it, Asya crossed the room, took the sketchbook cleanly from Celine's hands, and placed it on Elif's desk. No wasted movement. No hesitation. Then she looked at the other alpha with eyes like winter steel. Get up. The girl on Elif's chair laughed uncertainly. What? That's her chair. The girl stood. No one made a joke. No one pushed back. Celine's smile thinned. Seriously? Asya did not blink. Out. One of the other girls muttered something under her breath and moved toward the door. Celine stayed where she was. Her perfume filled the room in thick, sweet waves. You've changed. Asya's face turned unreadable. Not enough to ask twice. For a moment, Elif thought Celine might start a real fight. Then Celine laughed, low and contemptuous, and stepped around Asya toward the hallway. As she passed Elif, she paused just long enough to murmur, Careful. Then she left with the others. The silence afterward was sharp as broken glass. Asya shut the door and turned the lock. Elif clutched the sketchbook against her chest. You don't get points for that. Asya leaned back against the door. I know. Elif waited for a defense, an excuse, a demand for gratitude. None came. Her anger shifted restlessly under her skin. So what was that? Asya's gaze moved briefly to the sketchbook in Elif's arms. My friend's being rude. Elif gave a humorless smile. Your friends were always rude. The words hung between them. Asya looked away first. Yes. That should have felt satisfying. Instead, it left a strange hollow in Elif's chest. Later that night, after 3 hours of pretending to study while feeling Asya's silence across the room like weather, Elif climbed down from her bunk because the bathroom light had been left on. Asya was asleep on the lower bed, one arm flung over her eyes. A legal pad lay open on the blanket beside her. Elif meant only to reach for the switch. Instead, her gaze snagged on the page. It was a list. Student legal resources, scholarship office contacts, housing appeal steps. At the bottom, in hurried handwriting, was a note. Ask Coach Fiden about single room in athletics hall. Elif stared. The room felt oddly tilted. Asya had been looking for a way to move out. Not move Elif out. Move herself. Elif turned off the light and climbed back to bed with her heart beating too hard. The next morning she said nothing. Neither did Asya. The first major crack in their old story came 3 days later in the student center cafe. Elif was balancing a tray with soup and tea when 2 second-year alpha girls at the next table began whispering loudly enough to be heard. That's her? The one in Karahan's room. She looks breakable. Elif kept walking. She had learned years ago that some humiliations only grew when fed. Then one of them added, Maybe Asya finally got herself a pet. Elif stopped. So did the entire cafeteria around her, or maybe it only felt that way. Before she could turn, another voice cut across the room like a blade. Say it again. Asya. She was standing 2 tables back in training gear, a protein shake in one hand, her expression flat and lethal. The 2 girls froze. One tried to laugh it off. We were joking. Asya set the shake down very carefully. I know. The alpha girl swallowed. We didn't mean anything by it. Asya took 1 step closer. Then use your brain and explain the joke. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the espresso machine seemed quieter. The girl's bravado cracked first. Forget it. Asya's eyes hardened. No. The second girl stood abruptly. Come on. They left with trays abandoned and faces hot. Asya watched them go. Then she turned to Elif, and for one dangerous second the whole room seemed to understand they knew each other far better than anyone had guessed. Elif felt heat crawl up her throat. Don't do that. Asya frowned faintly. Do what? Act like you get to protect me. Asya's expression shuddered. I wasn't acting. That answer followed Elif all the way back to the dorm. She wanted to stay angry. She wanted to keep the story simple. But simple was dying by inches. That evening, while rain tapped at the window and Asya highlighted something in a sports medicine textbook, Elif finally asked the question that had been clawing at her since finding the legal pad. Why were you looking for another room? The highlighter stopped. Asya did not look up. You saw that? Yes. A beat of silence. Then Asya capped the marker and set it aside. I thought it would be easier if I left. Elif stared at her profile. For who? Asya laughed without humor. Take a guess. Elif's chest tightened in a way she did not appreciate. You assumed I'd want you gone. Asya looked at her then. I know you would. The certainty in her voice did something ugly to Elif's ribs. She folded her arms. That doesn't answer why you cared. Asya's eyes drifted to the rain-smeared window. When you came into that room and looked at me like I was the worst thing that had ever happened to you, I believed you. Elif felt the room go very still. You should. Yes. Asya said it too easily. That was the problem. If she had defended herself, Elif could have hated her cleanly. But Asya kept accepting the blame like a wound she thought she deserved. It made everything harder. The rain intensified. Somewhere downstairs, girls shrieked and laughed on their way in from the quad. Elif sat on the edge of her bed. You never even apologized. Asya swallowed once. I know. Did it matter so little you forgot? Asya's face changed then, just for a second. A crack in stone. I remember all of it. The answer came too fast to be rehearsed. Elif's anger sharpened. Then why? Asya's hands tightened on the textbook. Because every apology I tried to write sounded cheap. Elif stared. Poor you. I didn't say it to make you feel sorry for me. Good. Because she did not. Because pity was dangerous. Because some damaged girls knew exactly how to make you lower your weapon just by bleeding near you. Asya looked down. I was a coward. Elif laughed once, sharp and ugly. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. For a long moment, Asya said nothing. Then quietly, probably. The semester accelerated around them. Classes deepened. Names became faces. Group chats multiplied. Elif made friends with Daria from life drawing and a soft-spoken beta named Mina from art history. Asya became a constant presence in the athletics building, the library, the corridor outside their room, too visible to ignore and too changed to fit comfortably inside old categories. She still carried herself like power belonged to her. She still had that alpha stillness that made crowds part without noticing. But she no longer wielded cruelty for sport. Sometimes she wielded silence instead. One Wednesday night, Elif returned from studio at nearly midnight to find Asya half asleep at the desk, with a mug of instant noodles gone cold beside her. A stack of anatomy worksheets lay under her cheek. The sight was absurd enough to make Elif blink. Asya Karahan, feared pack princess, drooling on a tendon chart. Elif set down her portfolio tube quietly. She should have gone straight to bed. Instead, she stepped closer and read the top worksheet. Muscular insertions of the shoulder girdle. Half the labeling was wrong. Without thinking, Elif took a pencil from the desk cup and circled 2 errors. Then she froze. Asya's eyes were open. They met Elif's over the curve of her arm. For one long second, neither moved. Then Asya sat up slowly, taking in the page. You just corrected my homework. Elif straightened. It was painful to look at. Asya's mouth twitched. Thanks. Elif hesitated. Shoulder muscles are annoying. That earned the smallest smile. They really are. The smile changed her whole face. It was the first time Elif had seen it without edges. It made her heart do something unhelpful. She hated that. She hated it more when, the next morning, Asya left a peach yogurt on Elif's desk because she had overheard Elif complaining the cafeteria had run out. No note, no performance, just the yogurt. Elif ate it anyway and spent the entire lecture afterward furious with herself. The first time their bodies really collided, it was stupid. Elif came out of the bathroom in an oversized sleep shirt, hair damp, towel in hand, and walked straight into Asya standing outside the door in sweatpants and a sports bra, one hand lifted to knock. The impact pushed Elif back a step. Asya grabbed her waist to steady her. Heat. That was the first thing. The second was scent. Cedar, skin, soap, alpha. The third was the look on Asya's face when her gaze dropped involuntarily to the place where the loose collar of Elif's shirt had slipped off one shoulder. Silence detonated. Elif's pulse pounded against her throat. Asya's fingers tightened once, then released as if burned. Sorry. Her voice had gone rough. Elif could not decide which feeling arrived first. Embarrassment, anger, or the treacherous spark low in her stomach. You were blocking the door, Elif said because it was the only sentence her brain could assemble. Asya stepped aside immediately. I needed the shower. Then use it. Asya looked at her for one impossible second longer, then slipped into the bathroom and shut the door a little too hard. Elif stood in the middle of the room, towel clenched in both hands, trying to remember how breathing worked. This is going to end badly, she told herself. The terrifying part was that the thought no longer sounded like a warning. It sounded like a prophecy. The shift became undeniable at the autumn mixer. Daria dragged Elif there in a borrowed dark green dress and enough eyeliner to create false confidence. The athletics crowd was out in force, So were law students, media kids, and exactly the kind of polished, wealthy alphas Elif avoided on instinct. Asya arrived late in a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to her forearms, and half the room subtly recalibrated around her. Elif told herself she did not notice. That lie lasted 6 minutes. She noticed every girl who drifted toward Asya. She noticed every girl Asya dismissed politely. She noticed the way Asya's eyes kept searching the room and settling on her like a compass correcting north. Around 9, some charming finance alpha with 2 white teeth tried to corner Elif near the back porch, with a line about omegas in art always being the interesting kind. Elif was preparing a cutting reply when Asya appeared at her shoulder like bad weather. "She's with me." The alpha blinked. "I was just talking." Asya's expression stayed glacial. "You're done." He backed off. Elif exhaled sharply the moment he disappeared. "I did not need that." Asya turned to her. "He was crowding you." "I can handle being crowded." Asya's gaze dropped briefly to Elif's clenched hand around the edge of the porch rail. "No." The quiet certainty in that single word made Elif look up. Music throbbed behind them through the walls. Fairy lights swayed overhead. The porch smelled like damp leaves and spilled beer. Asya took 1 step closer. Her voice dropped. "You freeze first." Elif's throat went tight. She hated that Asya knew that. She hated that it was true. "That doesn't mean you own the right to step in." Asya's eyes darkened. "I know." "Then why do you keep doing it?" Because some questions only sounded simple from a distance. Asya looked at her mouth, then back to her eyes. "Because I can't stand watching it happen anymore." The words slid under Elif's ribs and lodged there. Neither of them moved. Inside, someone shouted at the beer pong table. Laughter exploded. Outside, the world narrowed to breath and scent and the porch rail at Elif's back. "Asya." It came out softer than she intended. Asya's hand lifted, hesitated, then settled lightly beside Elif's on the railing instead of touching her. "I know," she said again, but this time it sounded like surrender. Elif did the stupidest thing possible. She kissed her. It was quick, shocked, almost clumsy, more confession than technique. The moment their mouths met, Asya made a low, broken sound in the back of her throat and kissed her back like restraint had been a long illness. Elif's hand flew to Asya's shirt. Asya's hand found the side of her neck. The world disappeared in a hot white flash. Then the porch door slammed open. They sprang apart. Celine stood there, half-shadowed by party light, watching them with a smile too knowing to be anything but dangerous. "Well," she said. The room inside seemed to go silent all over again. Asya stepped between them instinctively. Celine laughed softly. "Relax." Her eyes slid around Asya's shoulder to Elif. "I just came to say Coach wants you tomorrow morning." Then, as if it were an afterthought, she raised her phone a fraction. Its screen glowed. A blurry photo. 2 women on a porch. Too close. Too intimate. Elif's stomach dropped. Asya went still in a way Elif had learned to fear. "Delete it." Celine's smile widened. "Why?" Asya's voice turned to ice. "Delete it." Celine tilted her head. "Maybe." Then she slipped the phone into her clutch and walked back inside. The porch felt suddenly airless. Elif's pulse beat against her ears. She took a picture. Asya looked stricken. "I know." "What the hell does she want?" Asya looked out into the dark yard. The answer took too long. Finally, she said, "Me." Elif stared. Before she could ask anything else, Asya's phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. Then a third time. Asya read the screen and all the color left her face. "Elif." Something cold spread through Elif's chest. "What?" Asya showed her the phone. A message from an unknown number. "Nice porch." Mrs. Carahan would hate this angle. Elif stopped breathing. That's your mother. Asya swallowed. Yes. The world snapped into a more dangerous shape. The kiss was still on Elif's mouth. The threat had already arrived. Asya shoved the phone into her pocket and grabbed her jacket off the porch chair. We're leaving. Elif followed her through the kitchen, through a wall of noise that felt absurdly normal compared to the panic under her skin, out into the cold night beyond the student house. They walked fast across the quad. Asya's hand hovered at Elif's elbow without touching. Halfway to the dorm, Elif stopped dead beneath a campus lamp. No. Asya turned sharply. What? You do not get to drag me into a crisis and then say nothing. Her breath came out white in the air. What is going on? Asya looked wrecked. The sight would have been satisfying if it had not also been terrifying. She has people watching me. Elif frowned. Your mother? Yes. That's insane. Asya laughed once, bitter and flat. You have no idea. Elif folded her arms against the cold. Then educate me. Asya stared at the wet pavement for a long moment. Then she said, Celine's mother works for my family. Elif blinked. Works how? Legal. The shape of the problem deepened. Asya's voice had gone remote, as if she were reporting on someone else's life. My mother likes leverage. Elif felt her stomach tighten. You mean blackmail? I mean control. Asya. Asya looked up. Moonlight turned her eyes almost silver. In my house, there are only two acceptable futures. Her voice stayed eerily calm. Useful or obedient. Elif's skin went cold. And what happens if you're neither? Asya's smile held no humor. You become a lesson. The words hung between them like wire. Elif swallowed. What does that have to do with me? Asya's expression changed, and that was somehow worse. Too much guilt. Too much fear. Everything. Elif stepped closer. Explain. For a second, Asya looked like she might refuse. Then something in her gave way. In junior year, my mother found out I had a crush. The confession came out low and sharp, like it had cut her on the way up. Elif stared. A crush? On a girl. Elif's heart kicked. Asya's laugh was brief and awful. Shocking, I know. Who? Asya held her gaze. The world narrowed. No, Elif whispered. Yes. The answer hollowed out the air. Elif's thoughts scattered. High school rearranged itself in a blur. The staring, the hot and cold attention, the way Asya's cruelty had sharpened most whenever someone else got too close to Elif. The day in the library when Asya had mocked the poem Elif was reading, then stolen it and kept it. The way Asya had looked at her when she laughed with another Omega outside chemistry. No, because that explanation was too ugly. Because it turned one kind of damage into another. Because if it was true, then every memory got worse before it got better. You're lying. Asya flinched. I wish I were. Elif's throat burned. So you made my life hell because you had a crush? I made your life hell because I was terrified. That is not better. I know. Elif laughed, but it came out ragged. You don't get points for honesty after the crime. I know. You keep saying that like it erases anything. Asya's voice cracked for the first time. It doesn't. That fragile break did something dangerous to Elif's anger. She hated that too. A gust of wind lifted the ends of Asya's hair. Across the quad, music from the party thumped faintly under the trees. Elif felt suddenly exhausted. So what now? Asya's face went blank in the way people's faces go when they are about to amputate something vital. Now you stay away from me. The sentence landed like cold water, Elif stared. What? My mother will go after anyone she thinks matters to me. Asia's voice steadied by force. Scholarships, housing, recommendations, whatever she can touch. Elif's skin prickled. That's not your decision. It is if I'm the reason. Elif stepped forward, furious now. You kissed me too. Asia's eyes shuddered. Mistake? The lie was so obvious it insulted them both. Elif laughed again, this time because the alternative was crying. Coward. Asia nodded once as if accepting a verdict. Yes. Then she turned and walked the rest of the way to the dorm without looking back. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in being cut open neatly. Asia moved out emotionally without moving an inch physically. She left the room before Elif woke. She returned after Elif was already in bed. She answered direct questions with clipped practical sentences. Window, sink, class notes, nothing else. At lunch on Monday, Elif discovered her student mural grant interview had been postponed pending review. On Tuesday, the professor supervising her independent charcoal series stopped replying to emails. On Wednesday, someone in the art building suggested gently that students from modest backgrounds should probably avoid extracurricular distractions if they wanted serious scholarships. Elif stood in the bathroom stall after hearing that and shook so hard she had to bite her fist to keep from making a sound. This was not random. This was reach. This was power proving it could enter through any unlocked door. That night, Elif came back to the dorm to find a file envelope on her pillow. No note. Inside were photocopies. Bank transfers from a Karahan Foundation account to a private event coordinator tied to their old high school fundraiser. An internal email chain mentioning display boards and correcting an undesirable outcome. At the bottom of one page was a name Elif recognized. Asia's mother's chief assistant. The art corridor. The ripped scholarship portfolio. For years, Elif had carried that memory like a brand. Now proof sat trembling in her hands that Asia's mother had ordered it. Not Asia. Not some random jealous classmate. A grown woman with money and malice and influence had targeted a teenage Omega because she had outperformed the wrong Alpha. Elif sank onto the bed. The room blurred. A second sheet slipped from the envelope. A single line in Asia's handwriting. I was late. The same phrase Asia had nearly said in the rain weeks ago. Elif read it again. I was late. Not an apology, not an excuse. Just the truth she had never been given. When the door opened 20 minutes later, Elif was still sitting there with the papers in her lap. Asia froze on the threshold. The duffel bag slid down her shoulder. You found it. Elif laughed through the tears already drying on her face. Found it? She lifted the top page. You left this on my bed. Asia stepped in and shut the door quietly. I thought you deserved to know. Elif stood so fast, the envelope fell to the floor. No. Her voice shook. Do you have any idea what I did with that memory? Asia's face was ghost pale. Yes. No, you don't. Elif's anger rose too fast to control now. I built my entire hatred of you around that day. She slapped the papers against her own chest. I remembered your face every time I thought about quitting art. I remembered your silence every time I second-guessed myself. I remembered you standing there. Asia's throat worked once. I know. Elif let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. Stop saying that. The room crackled with everything they had not survived cleanly. Asia did not defend herself. She did not say it wasn't her fault. She did not say she had been young. Instead, she said the one thing Elif had never once imagined hearing. I loved you and I let them hurt you. Silence. Utter. Complete. Elif stared at her as if the words had changed gravity. Asia's eyes shone but did not look away. I thought if I was cruel enough in public, my mother would stop looking. I thought if I made you hate me, You'd be safer from all of it. A tear slid down Elif's cheek before she realized it was there. That is the sickest thing you've ever said to me. Asya's mouth trembled. I know. Elif laughed wetly, exhausted by the repetition, exhausted by the impossible collision of rage and grief and relief. You do not get to call that love. I'm not. Asya's voice dropped lower. I'm calling it what broke me. For a moment, Elif could not breathe. Every old version of herself seemed to be standing in the room with them. The girl in the chemistry lab, the girl in the bathroom after the ripped drawings, the girl who thought the beautiful Alpha by the window was the face of everything cruel. They all wanted different things. Vengeance, explanation, distance, arms. Elif hated them all. She hated the shaking in her own hands. She hated how wrecked Asya looked. Most of all, she hated that the truth had arrived too late to fix what it clarified. Her voice came out thin. Why are you giving me this now? Asya's expression hollowed. Because my mother is escalating. Elif stiffened. What does that mean? It means she thinks if she hurts your future, I'll go back into line. The room seemed to constrict around them. It means Selin wasn't freelancing. It means the grant interview and the mural review are just the beginning. Elif looked at the papers again. And this is what? Insurance. Asya drew a breath. And maybe a weapon. Elif's heartbeat steadied around a new idea. Not clean, not noble, useful. You want to fight her? Asya looked almost startled. I want her away from you. That's not an answer. A tiny flicker of something returned to Asya's face. No. Elif wiped her cheek hard with the heel of her hand. Good. Asya frowned. Elif. No. Elif stepped closer, voice sharpening. You do not get to martyr yourself and decide for me. Your mother tried to ruin my life in high school. She's trying again now. If she wants a war, I'm done being the girl who cries in the bathroom and disappears. The words left the room glowing. Asya stared at her like she was seeing her for the first time. You don't know what she can do. Elif's mouth hardened. Then she can learn what I can do. That should have been the triumphant turning point. It wasn't. Because 2 days later, Asya broke Elif's heart anyway. It happened outside the law building at noon. Elif had just left a meeting with a student legal aid volunteer recommended by Daria's cousin when she saw Selin near the front steps, talking into her phone with that same cat-with-cream smile. Elif slowed. Selin saw her and smiled wider. Well? Elif kept walking. Move. Selin shifted deliberately into her path. I heard your grant review disappeared. Elif's jaw clenched. Get out of the way. Selin leaned in. You really thought kissing Asya on a porch would end with poetry and hand-holding? Elif felt the blood drain from her face. Before she could answer, another voice cut in. Selin. Asya. She was crossing the quad at a run, face storm-dark, shoulders rigid. Selin stepped back with lazy grace. Saved by your Alpha. Elif turned sharply. I don't need saving. Selin laughed. No. Her eyes slid to Asya. You need warning. Then she walked away. Asya stopped in front of Elif, breathing hard. Did she touch you? Elif stared at her. That's what you're asking? Asya's eyes flashed. Elif. No. Weeks of fear and confusion and helpless rage finally tore loose. You do not get to keep choosing what matters. Asya's expression shifted from anger to alarm. Elif, not here. Why? Elif's voice rose. Because people might hear? Because your family might see? Because you only want me close when it's in secret and far when it costs you something? The words landed. So did the crowd's attention. Students slowed on the steps. Someone pretended very badly not to watch. Asya's face went white. That's not fair. Elif laughed. Fair? The sound cracked. You want fair now? Asya stepped closer and lowered her voice. Please. That single word nearly undid Elif. Then Selin's earlier smirk flashed in her head. Then the grant interview. Then the ripped drawings. Then the envelope on the pillow. And something in her snapped. You ruined my life in high school. She took a shaking breath. Do not ruin it twice. Asya flinched like she had been struck. Silence spread outward from them in rings. Then Asya did the one thing Elif had not expected. She nodded, slowly, like accepting sentence. You're right. The calm in those words terrified Elif more than any argument. Asya stepped back. When she spoke again, her voice had turned flat and formal. Then let me make this easier. Elif's stomach dropped. Asya. In case there was confusion, Asya said, loud enough now for the nearby crowd to hear. There is nothing between us. Elif went cold from scalp to heel. The steps behind them seemed to disappear. This isn't funny. Asya's face was marble. It wasn't supposed to be. A few students exchanged glances. Someone whispered. Elif could feel the old humiliation rushing back like floodwater. Asya. I was trying to handle it privately. The performance was so precise it made Elif sick. But if you need clarity, here it is. You were a mistake. The world blurred. Elif knew, with a part of herself untouched by shock, that Asya was lying. She knew it the way one knows a scream through walls. But the body does not care when pain is strategic. Pain still lands. Pain still humiliates. Pain still tears. Elif slapped her. The crack split the air. Nobody on the steps spoke. A red mark bloomed across Asya's cheek. Her eyes closed for 1 second. When they opened again, they were full of something so raw it nearly made Elif throw up. Then Elif turned and walked away, while the old nightmare of public humiliation crawled over her skin all over again. She did not go back to the dorm. She packed that night with Daria guarding the door and Mina carrying boxes down to a borrowed hatchback. Housing approved the emergency room change within 12 hours, which told Elif exactly how much pressure had already been applied behind the scenes. By evening, she was in a temporary single at the far end of the art annex. Smaller, colder, blessedly empty. 3 days passed without a word from Asya. Then, on the 4th day, Mina burst into studio with her phone in one hand and panic in her eyes. Elif! Elif looked up from her charcoal ground. What? You need to see this. On the screen was a social post from a campus gossip account. No names, no direct faces, just a caption about an athletics alpha and a scholarship-chasing omega making scenes in public, plus blurry zoomed photos from the law building steps. Comments multiplied beneath it like mold. Gold digger, heat trapper, pack climber, attention seeker. Elif felt the room tilt. Mina swore softly. I reported it. Daria, arriving 2 seconds later, took one look at Elif's face and said the sort of creative profanity that should have earned a medal. Elif set the charcoal down very carefully. Her hands were steady now in the dangerous way. Not calm. Past calm. She did this, Mina whispered. Elif shook her head. No. They both looked at her. Elif's voice was hollow. Celine did. Daria's mouth hardened. So what do we do? For the first time in weeks, Elif had an answer ready. We finish it. The war that followed was not glamorous. It was paperwork and screenshots and strategy meetings in legal aid offices that smelled like old binders. It was Daria bribing a student reporter with expensive pastries to look into donor influence. It was Mina finding archived event photos from their old high school fundraiser. It was Elif compiling every message, every postponement, every administrative irregularity into one brutal timeline. And, in the middle of it all, it was Asya. Not beside her. Never openly. But everywhere. An anonymous packet sent to the campus ethics board with internal Karahan correspondence attached. A legal memo dropped into the student reporter's inbox from an encrypted address. A witness statement from a retired school custodian who remembered being told not to interfere with a display correction years ago. Asya was feeding the fire from the shadows. Elif knew her fingerprints even where none were visible. It made the loneliness worse. It made the fight possible. The showdown came sooner than expected. The Karahan Foundation had already scheduled its annual donor gala at a glass-walled hotel on the river. University officials would be there. Board members. Athletics donors. Media students. The whole architecture of polite power. And because arrogance makes people careless, Mrs. Karahan had agreed to host a panel on ethical leadership in youth development. When Daria read that out loud, Mina laughed so hard she nearly inhaled tea. Elif just stared at the invitation on the table. Then she said, "I'm going." The ballroom glittered with old money and new lies. Elif wore a black dress Mina had tailored with ruthless competence, and silver earrings Daria called revenge jewelry. Her hair was pinned back. Her chin was up. Her pulse was trying to claw its way through her ribs. At the entrance, a volunteer glanced at her name, hesitated, and then smiled too brightly. There were already whispers. Good. Let them spread. Inside, the room gleamed, crystal lights, champagne, pack emblems on lapels, women laughing behind perfect teeth. On the stage, a screen displayed the foundation logo beside the phrase, "Building Futures with Integrity." Elif almost smiled. Across the room, Mrs. Karahan stood in pearl gray silk speaking to a university trustee. Elegance wrapped around a blade. Near her, in a black suit with no family pin on the lapel, stood Asya. One look at her face told Elif everything. She had not expected Elif to come. She had expected, perhaps, to bleed alone. Too late. A moderator stepped onto the stage. The panel began. Mrs. Karahan spoke beautifully about mentorship, resilience, and the duty of powerful institutions to protect vulnerable students. Each sentence was polished enough to reflect the chandeliers. Elif waited until the first round of applause. Then she stood. "Can vulnerable students ask questions?" The room shifted. Heads turned. The moderator blinked. Mrs. Karahan's smile froze just enough for those looking closely. "Of course," the older alpha said. Her voice was honey over steel. Elif took a step into the aisle. "Would you define protection as destroying a teenager's scholarship portfolio because she outperformed your daughter?" The ballroom went silent so completely that the river outside seemed louder. The moderator went pale. Mrs. Karahan smiled, as if at a child misunderstanding etiquette. "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean." Elif reached into her clutch and pulled out a folder. The same ugly manila kind that had changed her life on a dorm pillow. "Good." Her voice carried better now. "Then let's all learn together." Gasps broke around the room as she handed the front set of copies to a row of trustees and passed the next to a student journalist, already halfway out of her seat with shock on her face. Emails. Transfers. Recommendations. Delayed reviews. A pattern, neat and vicious. Mrs. Karahan remained seated for exactly 3 seconds. Then she rose. "This is inappropriate." Elif laughed softly. So was sabotaging a minor. The moderator tried to intervene. A donor asked for security. A board member was already skimming the documents with increasing horror. Asya had not moved. She stood just off the stage like someone bracing for an impact she had chosen. Mrs. Karahan's eyes snapped to her daughter. "You!" Asya said nothing. The older alpha took one measured step down from the stage. Did you provide these materials? The room held its breath. Asya met her mother's gaze. Yes. The single word detonated. Whispers turned to open shock. 2 reporters lifted their phones. A trustee demanded to know whether the university had been aware. Mrs. Carahan's composure cracked for the first time. You foolish girl. Asya's face was very calm. No. Her voice carried cleanly through the room. I was foolish when I helped you hurt people by staying silent. Elif's eyes burned. Mrs. Carahan went still in the terrifying way powerful women do when rage becomes calculation. You are throwing away everything. Asya looked at Elif, then back at her mother. No. She stepped forward into full view of the room. I'm choosing something for the first time in my life. Mrs. Carahan's mouth tightened. Her? The contempt in that single word would have destroyed Elif a month ago. Now it just clarified the battlefield. Asya did not hesitate. Yes. The ballroom erupted. Questions. Phones. One trustee demanding the ethics office freeze all foundation partnerships. Selin, pale and furious near the back of the room, trying to slip out before a student journalist blocked her path. Mrs. Carahan's face hardened into something almost inhuman. You are no daughter of mine. The sentence hit. Elif saw it hit. Saw Asya's shoulders tighten against it. Saw the wound land in real time. But Asya did not bend. Then stop acting like I'm your property. Security finally appeared, too late to control anything meaningful. A journalist asked whether the foundation had retaliated against current students. Another asked whether there were more undisclosed interventions in secondary school placements. Panic moved through the donor tables like spilled ink. Mrs. Carahan turned as if to leave, then stopped and looked directly at Elif. You think you've won? Elif lifted her chin. No. Her voice was steady now. I think you got caught. The look Mrs. Carahan gave her promised future damage. The look Elif gave back promised she would no longer face it alone. After that, the night fractured into consequences. Statements were requested. Phones rang. University council huddled near the side doors. Celine vanished before anyone could stop her. Asya remained in the ballroom long enough to give one formal statement to the ethics board chair and one devastatingly calm interview to a student reporter. Then, when the immediate frenzy had shifted elsewhere, she walked toward Elif through the wreckage of her old world. Elif's heart kicked painfully. Asya stopped a few feet away, not touching, not assuming. Everything about her looked stripped raw. They froze all my family accounts before I left the hotel. Elif blinked. What? Asya gave a tiny, exhausted laugh. My mother moves fast. So do compliance departments when cameras are involved. The bitterness in the words could not fully hide the freedom under them. Elif looked at her for a long second. You knew this could happen. Yes. And you did it anyway. Asya's gaze did not waver. Yes. Around them, the ballroom still buzzed with scandal. The world was changing shape by the second. Elif should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt tired all the way through. Asya. It was only her name, but Asya's throat moved as if it were a wound. I know I don't get to ask for anything tonight, she said. The sentence hurt because it was true. Elif thought about the law-building steps, the public rejection, the cruel words spoken as armor. She thought about the envelope, the gala, the years before. There's a car waiting outside for me, Asya said. A hired one. Coach arranged it. Elif frowned. To take you where? As long as the card still works, maybe a motel. After that, I'll figure it out. Elif stared. For a second, she almost laughed at the absurdity. Asya Carahan, former heir to a private pack empire, talking about motels with the flat practical tone of someone discussing weather. The girl looked devastatingly tired. For the first time, she also looked entirely real. Daria would later call what happened next predictable. Elif still believed it was madness. "Come home with me." Asya froze. The words seemed to hit her physically. "Elif. It's a room the size of a closet, and the radiator sounds haunted." Elif's mouth trembled despite herself. "But the annex has security and Mina smuggled in a kettle, so we're basically aristocrats." Asya's eyes shone with something broken and disbelieving. "I don't deserve that." "No." The honesty landed between them. Elif breathed in, breathed out. "But tonight isn't about deserve." Asya looked at her as if she were trying not to fall apart in public. Then she nodded once. The annex room was too small for healing and perfect for honesty. Asya slept on the floor that first night because Elif insisted, and because neither of them trusted easy closeness after everything. Around 3 a.m, Elif woke to the sound of controlled breathing, turning into the kind that was too careful to be normal. She looked down. Asya was sitting with her back against the wall, knees drawn up, phone screen dark in her hand. She looked 10 years younger and 20 years more exhausted. Elif sat up. "Asya." Asya went still. "Sorry." "What happened?" A pause. Then, "My mother sent a message." Elif's stomach tightened. "What did it say?" Asya laughed once, soft and empty. "That I chose an omega over blood." The cruelty of it was so unsurprising it somehow hurt more. Elif pushed the blanket aside and climbed down. She sat on the floor across from Asya, not touching. "What did you say?" Asya's eyes looked almost black in the low light. "Nothing." "Good." A beat passed, then another. The room hummed with radiator noises and distant pipes. Finally, Asya whispered, "I wanted to choose you in high school." Elif shut her eyes briefly. "Don't." "It's true." "I know." That was the problem. They sat with the ache of it. All the futures lost before they began. All the versions of themselves built around damage. When Elif opened her eyes, Asya was looking at her with unbearable tenderness and unbearable guilt, braided so tightly together they had become one expression. "You don't owe me comfort," Asya said. "I know." "Then why are you here?" Elif exhaled shakily. Because she was tired of pretending her heart had stayed simple. Because love, once admitted, does not become less true merely because it arrived in terrible circumstances. Because some girls break you and then spend the rest of your life trying to become gentle enough to hold what they broke. Because she still did not know whether that was enough. Because she wanted it to be. Instead of saying any of that, Elif answered with the most honest sentence she had. "Because I'm still angry, and I'm still here." Asya made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. Her shoulders bowed. Elif moved before she could reconsider. She crossed the small distance and sat beside her. Not in her lap, not in her arms, just beside. After a long, silent second, Asya leaned her forehead against Elif's shoulder like someone laying down a weapon. Elif let her. That was the beginning of the bittersweet part. Not reconciliation. Not yet. Something slower, harder, more honest. The university investigation moved quickly because public scandal is the only alarm privileged institutions truly hear. The grant review was reinstated. The mural interview was rescheduled with apologies so careful they sounded legally vetted. The gossip account was suspended after Mina traced it to a campus server linked to Celine's friend group. Celine herself vanished for 2 weeks, then reappeared with a rumor about taking a leave to focus on family matters. Mrs. Karahan issued a statement about malicious misrepresentation and false narratives. Then more documents surfaced. Then another former student came forward. Then a donor resigned. Power was not collapsing. but it was cracking. Asya got cut off completely. No more cards, no more chauffeur, no more apartment. The coach who had always liked her too much to admit it found her part-time work in the training clinic inventory room. The dean of athletics told her, in a surprisingly gentle office meeting, that she could keep her student place but not her captain track until the investigation closed. Asya accepted it all like weather. Sometimes that calm frightened Elif. Sometimes it broke her heart. They did not become a couple overnight. That would have been easier, simpler, more cinematic. Real life, unfortunately, preferred precision cuts. There were days Elif could not bear to be touched. There were days Asya would look at her with such quiet devotion that Elif wanted either to kiss her or scream. There were nights they laughed over instant noodles and anatomy jokes and the absurd misery of freshman plumbing. There were mornings Elif woke from a dream of high school hallways and found herself furious all over again. Asya never argued with the anger. She learned to sit inside it, to answer questions she hated, to say I did that without asking for absolution, to say I was wrong without adding excuses. It was infuriating. It was also the first real thing Elif had ever seen her do. Winter arrived early. The annex windows sweated in the mornings. The bakery on the corner sold cardamom buns that Mina insisted were medicinal. Elif got the mural grant back and painted until her wrists ached. Asya worked, studied, and slowly learned how to live without the architecture of wealth holding up every wall around her. One evening, Elif found her staring at the price of pasta in the campus market, as if it were a philosophical problem. Elif laughed so hard she had to lean on the cart. Asya looked offended. "This is robbery. This is dinner." "I used to think groceries just appeared." Elif blinked, then laughed harder. Asya ended up laughing too, red-cheeked and embarrassed, and more beautiful than she had any right to be, while holding 2 discount tomato cans. The second kiss happened in the studio, not because they had planned it, because rain trapped them there after hours, because Elif was working on a charcoal portrait, and Asya sat quietly in the corner pretending to read while actually watching her with that new careful tenderness. Because eventually Asya asked, "Is that me?" Elif glanced at the sketch, half-finished, soft around the mouth, sad around the eyes. "Yes." Asya stared at it. "You made me look kind." Elif's pencil paused. "I made you look honest." When she looked up, Asya was already standing, already close enough that the room changed shape around them. "I was thinking about that day on the law building steps," Asya said. Elif's stomach tightened. "You don't have to." "I do." Asya's voice went rough. "I said those things because Selin's friend was filming, and my mother had already threatened your cousin's internship by name." Elif went still. "What?" Asya's eyes closed briefly. "Yes." Cold anger flickered, not at Asya this time, at the machine, at the reach, at how many corners power had crawled into before they noticed. "I know that doesn't fix anything," Asya whispered. Elif looked at her for a long second. Then she set the pencil down. "No." Asya nodded, pain plain on her face. "No," Elif said again, softer now. "But it changes where I put the knife." Asya's breath caught. Elif stepped forward. "And I'm tired of pretending I don't love you just because I hate what you did." The silence after that confession was almost holy. Asya looked destroyed by it. "Elif, don't make me repeat it." "I would never." Asya's hand lifted slowly, every inch of it asking. When Elif did not pull away, her fingers touched Elif's cheek with painful care. The kiss that followed was nothing like the porch. Not desperate. Not shocked. It was slower. Sadder. Sweeter. It tasted like forgiveness still under negotiation. It tasted like choosing each other without pretending the past had been erased. When they finally drew apart, both of them were crying a little. Neither mentioned it. Spring brought consequences and small mercies. Mrs. Carahan stepped down from 2 foundation boards. The university announced an independent review into donor interference. Celine returned long enough to drop one final venomous comment near the law building and discovered, to her lasting surprise, that Elif could now ruin a woman with a single public sentence. Asya laughed for 5 full minutes afterward. Elif got the scholarship she should have had years earlier. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while she was in bed half awake. She read it once, twice, then made a noise so strange Asya nearly fell off the chair. What happened? Elif shoved the phone at her. Asya read the first line and went absolutely still. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and cried without dignity. Elif laughed and cried with her. The bittersweet truth was that the scholarship did not restore the lost years. It did not give 16-year-old Elif her portfolio back untouched. It did not change the fact that love had come wearing the face of her old bully. But it mattered. It mattered because some wrongs do not need reversal to need naming. It mattered because survival deserves witnesses. By the end of the semester, the annex room had become theirs through repetition, kettle steam, borrowed blankets, and arguments over whether instant noodles counted as a side dish or a complete moral failure. Then housing found Elif a real off-campus sublet above a bakery. Tiny, crooked, 1 bedroom plus a narrow living room. The floors slanted toward the stove. The window frames swelled when it rained. To Elif, it looked like freedom. To Asya, it looked like something she would refuse out of pride unless Elif handled it carefully. So Elif stood in the empty kitchen with a lease in one hand and said, "I cannot afford this alone." Asya looked around. "You could get Daria." "I could." Elif leaned against the counter. "But Daria sheds eyeliner and chaos." Asya's mouth twitched. "True." Elif lifted the second key. "I was thinking maybe I've had enough dramatic roommate experiences to choose one on purpose." Asya stared at the key like it might burn her. "Elif." "Don't make it weird." "It is weird." "Yes." Elif smiled, tired and real. "It's also ours if you want it." Asya took the key with shaking fingers. That first night above the bakery, the room smelled like warm bread and paint thinner and rain-damp cardboard. They ate cheap pasta out of bowls balanced on unpacked boxes. The radiator clanked like it was haunted by an elderly blacksmith. At midnight, a pipe somewhere in the wall shrieked hard enough to make them both jump. Elif laughed until she snorted. Asya laughed too, then kept laughing, then had to sit down because the laughter tipped unexpectedly into tears. Elif crossed the room and knelt in front of her. "Asya." Asya pressed her lips together, trying and failing to regain control. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For ruining too much of your life before I ever got to live in it." The truth of that hurt. It always would. Elif rested her forehead against Asya's knee. "You did." Asya laughed wetly. "Harsh." "You like honesty now." A shaky exhale. Then Elif looked up. "But you also came back for it." Asya's face crumpled a little. Elif touched her cheek. "That matters." It was not a fairy tale absolution. It was better. It was accurate. They built a life in ordinary pieces after that. Asya working mornings at the clinic and evenings tutoring first-year athletes who had never been told no. Elif painting commissions at the kitchen table with flowery sunlight slanting through the window from the bakery sign below. Laundry arguments. Burnt toast. One glorious second-hand couch found by Mina and carried up 3 flights of stairs with enough swearing to qualify as a ritual. There were still hard nights. A donor article would appear. A message from an unknown account would slip through a filter. A smell in a corridor would send Elif back to high school for 10 awful seconds. A formal envelope from home would arrive for Asya, and sit unopened on the counter until she finally fed it to the sink fire, with hands that did not stop shaking for an hour. Love did not make those things disappear. It made them survivable. On the 1-year anniversary of the day Elif opened that dorm room door, rain silvered the city from dawn onward. The bakery closed early because the streets flooded near the tram line. Their apartment glowed gold against the storm. Elif sat on the windowsill in one of Asia's sweaters with a sketchbook on her knees. Asya came up behind her and wrapped both arms around her waist. No hesitation now, no question. Just home. "What are you drawing?" Elif angled the page away. "You're nosy." "I'm your roommate." Elif smiled. Dangerous title. Asya kissed the side of her neck. Best one I ever had. Outside, rain hammered the glass. Inside, the kitchen light warmed the cracked walls into something almost beautiful. Elif closed the sketchbook and turned in Asya's arms. The woman looked different from the girl in high school. Not softer, exactly. Truer. The old sharpness was still there. So was the strength. But now it no longer pointed outward to wound anything that came close. Now it guarded. Now it built. Now it held. "Do you ever wish it had happened differently?" Asya asked quietly. There it was. The question hidden in 100 smaller ones. The one that always waited beneath even their happiest days. Elif looked at the rain for a moment. She thought about the girl in the art corridor. The girl who cried in bathroom stalls. The girl who hated the alpha by the window so cleanly because hate was easier than complexity. She thought about the envelope on the pillow. The gala. The annex. The bakery. The key. The couch. The way Asya now reached for her like asking and certainty had learned to live in the same hand. "Yes," Elif said. Asya's face tightened, though she had asked for truth. Elif lifted a hand and touched her cheek. "Yes," she said again, softer now. "I wish you had loved me like this from the start. I wish no one had taught you that cruelty was safer than tenderness. I wish I had never spent years thinking your face was the shape of every bad thing." Asya's eyes filled. Elif swallowed around the ache in her own throat. "But I still choose this." The words went through Asya like light through water. She made that same broken sound she had made on the porch a lifetime ago. Only now there was no fear in it. Only relief. Only grief finally given somewhere safe to rest. She kissed Elif slowly. Not to erase. Not to prove. Just to love. When they broke apart, Asya rested her forehead against Elif's. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the version of me you should have met first." Elif smiled through tears. "Too late." Asya's mouth fell. Then Elif laughed softly and kissed the corner of it. But not too late for this. Outside, thunder rolled over the river. Inside, the apartment smelled like bread and rain and graphite, and the kind of future nobody respectable would have planned for them. It was small. It was crooked. It was expensive in all the real ways. It was theirs. And in the room above the bakery, with old wounds still scarred under the skin, and a love neither of them had earned easily, Elif let the girl who had once ruined her life hold her like she had spent every day since learning how not to. That was not a perfect ending. It was sweeter than that. It was honest. And for them, honesty had finally become enough.